But now we're on Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Beis, and we're trying to prove that misukenes is sharia. You're allowed to eat it after the shechita. If you're going to tell me that there's no difference between an animal that has an internal puncture in one of its vital organs and an animal which is just about to die, and therefore you're going to tell me that a misukenes has the same status as a treifa, and shechita is not going to help you to be matir the basar, is then lichtov rachmana chelev nevela yosel chavalacha v'chelev treifa losel chelev. In other words, what the Gemara is arguing here is that the Torah shouldn't have had to give us this whole spiel here about adding another prohibition on top of the Isur Chelev in both the case of Nevela and Treifa. Why can't the Torah just leave out Treifa? And Amina, listen to my logic, my Kal V'chomer. Uma michayim. If you're telling me that a misukenes, even though it's still alive, but it has shows and displays that it's going to die, it's already prohibited, and it's prohibited b'toras treifa, because now you're arguing that a misukenes has the same identical status as treifa, and therefore the chelev of this animal is going to be prohibited under both categories of chelev, and in addition to chelev under treifa is liachar misa miboile. Why did the Torah have to tell me that after it drops dead and it's nevela, then the Isur nevela is chal on top of the Isur chelev? If the Isur treifa, when it's still alive, is going to be chal on top of the Isur chelev, and the Isur treifa applies with the misukenes when the animal is still alive, how much more so after the animal is dead? Why did the Torah have to spell out that the nevela is prohibited in addition to chelev? Elamida Kosarachman and Nevela, from the fact that the Torah had to spell out that the chelev of Nevela is prohibited, Michlal the Treifa Lav Haina Misukenes, I have to conclude that a Treifa is not a Misukenes, or say it the other way around, a Misukenes is not called a Treifa. Again, let's go over the logic, because if you can identify a Misukenes as a Treifa, and the Torah therefore already told me with regard to a treifa which is still alive, and yet you're not allowed to eat the chelev of a treifa, as we discussed, then how much more so you're not allowed to eat the chelev of an nevela when it's actually dead? And why did the Torah have to tell me that the chelev of nevela is asur? And the Gemara doesn't like it. Maskifla Marbarav Ashi Vidil Maliol. Let's go back to our assumption that a Masukenes is a treifa. And if you're telling me Nevela, because why did the Torah have to add Nevela? We could derive Nevela when it's fully dead from an animal that's not yet fully dead. And the answer is Lahach Nevela de lo Asya Mikoach Misukenes. Echidomish Asa Gistra. We're assuming throughout this whole sugya, now the Gemara is going to question that assumption in the name of Rav Ashi, Marbar Rav Ashi, that immediately after misukenes, the next stage is that the animal drops dead. Finito. It's a complete carcass. It's just a matter of waiting a few minutes. Misukenes is the stage that leads to nevela. Gemara says, you know what? According to Marbar Rav Ashi, the Gemara is going to reject this, but according to Marbar Rav Ashi, I can imagine a situation where the animal is a misukenes, but it becomes a nevela without being a misukenes. Meaning, I can picture a reality in which the animal became a nevela without being a misukenes. It never went through that earlier stage of being a misukenes, and therefore the Torah had to add nevela as a separate isur because it's not the next stage after being misukenes. And how do you work that out? The reality is aso gistra, right? Gistra means he somehow chops the animal up and down vertically or horizontally. and completely splits the animal into two parts. Immediately, the animal is in Avela. There was never even a second that it was close to death. So Gemara doesn't like it. Hasam nami purta. When he starts the process of chopping the animal down the middle, at some point, at the very early stage, before it became an Avela, it's already misukenes. And therefore, the underlying premise of Rav Ashi's attack is completely wrong. Even before he got to split the animal mostly, and it became an Avela, even so, it was already on its way to die. Okay, so far we find that we can derive the heter of Sharia of Misukenes for the fact that Torah had to prohibit an Avela. Now the Gemara is offering another possibility. If you like it, Im kain lema chelev nevela utrefa. There are a couple extra words in this pasuk. Right, let's go back to the pasuk, and the pasuk says chelev nevela yeyasel l'chol malacha, and then it says v'chelev trefa lo sochenem. Why did the Torah have to separate and address the chelev of nevela separately, and then with a new sentence with extra words address the chelev of a trefa? Lema chelev nevela utrefa. So now we have an extra few words in the pasuk, because the pasuk repeats the word chelev with regard to trefa. There was no need to do so. There's a shortcut here. Could have said chelev nevela utrefa. Why does it repeat the word chelev? Lamali. So this is what we call a mute. Chelev is a mute. Zuhi she'ein chel b'cholek mibsara. Dafka, in the case where it drops dead, and it's already a dead animal in its carcass, and we don't separate the chelev from the rest of the body. And the whole thing is called an avela, including the chelev, even though the chelev was already prohibited. Yeshla cheres, but the diuk is to exclude a case of chel b'cholek mivsar ve'ezu misukeres, where the chelev remains asur, but the rest of the body of the animal is mutter. And that's the case of misukenes. Iboy, same a third possibility, may hacha from here. And now we're talking about Yechezkel. Now, Hashem gives Yechezkel a little bit of what we call in Yiddish a shtach. And he tells Yechezkel that you're not worthy, and therefore you have to take, just 1 second. Just wanted to get the exact language here. Oh, yeah. You have to take a cake. The dough of the cake is made from barley. Tastes awful. And not only that, the fire that you use underneath this dough to bake the cake is human feces. Anyway, this is a way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu indicates to Yechezkel, buddy, you better do tshuva. So Yechezkel comes to defend himself. And he says, V'omar, I said to Hashem, Aha Adoni Elokim, hear my God, I'm going to tell you how great I am in terms of piety. I'm a tzaddik. Nafshi lo mituma, my soul has not become contaminated. Nevela utrefa lo achalti, very strange. Who eats nevela and trefa? Minurai v'arata, from my childhood. Lo ba b'fi besar pigul. No one's allowed to eat pigul. So now the Gemara has to understand what Yechezkel is saying about himself. Where's his boasting of piety? These are all prohibitions. Now keep in mind, Tumah is a prohibition because Yechezkel is a Kohen. Hine nafshi lo min Tumah. So now we're going to have to interpret each one of these three phrases. How does Yechezkel build himself up and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't deserve to have this insult? So the word tuma here has nothing to do really with, did he walk into a cemetery, but rather did he cause himself to become a balkari? Means he had these thoughts, bad thought, immodest thoughts during the day. Maybe he got stuck with the internet or something, and therefore he had carry at night. No, I didn't have any wrong thoughts. Now the word kos means shchita. Now what does it mean when he says, I didn't eat from meat that people around me say kos kos, immediately shechted? Meaning I didn't eat from an animal that's misukenes. And everybody's saying to him, shecht it quickly. Even after it was shechted, I wouldn't eat from that meat. Which proves that Mikar Dini he was allowed and permitted to eat from the meat. Lo ba befi basar pigel shalachalti mibema shahor b'chach. Imagine you bring an animal in front of a chacham, and the chacham paskins that you're allowed to eat the basar of the animal. I wouldn't eat the basar of the animal. The very fact that the question was raised, that puts a little bit of a doubt. I avoided all that. And another version, Mishum Rabbi Nosson Amru Shalachalti Mevhemish Lahurmula Matnoseha. Technically speaking, you're allowed to eat from the meat of an animal before you mafresh the Zrol Chayim V'Keva. We'll have a whole parak about that later on. It doesn't create tevel, but I wouldn't eat from it. I waited till he separated the Zrol Chayim V'Keva. Truth is, this last shot of Reb Nosson is very, very difficult because Yechezkel himself is a Kohen. So therefore, any Zrol Chayim Kohen anyway goes to him, whatever. I'm bothered by this whole Gemara. I don't know who to talk to. If you gentlemen have an answer to this, I never was of the opinion that you have to take the chumrah of the day. I don't know that you should boast about the fact that meat that you're allowed to eat, you refuse to eat. Some yotzo potzo decide to ask a shaila, but the Rav said you're allowed to eat it. A mesukeres you're allowed to eat. The other one I understand about, he boasts about the fact that he avoided having bad thoughts. If you're going to tell me that an animal that's misukenes is allowed to eat hainu rabusa to Yechezkel, now we understand the special piety that Yechezkel is boasting about, that he wouldn't eat from that animal even after shchita. Okay, Ad Kan, we have three possible sources that a misukenes is mutter. What is a misukenes? Hechi domi misukenes. Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Rav. Hol sheba midim osa v'eno medis. This, my friends, is the story of the lions in Dr. Seuss's book, The King's Stilts. The lions can't stand up. They can't get up on 2 feet. Again, you might want to read the book. It's a real Musa Sefer, like a lot of Dr. Seuss's books. The animals are lying horizontally on the floor. So when I learned this Gemara, Abosai, I came to the conclusion that an animal could be depressed, and as a result of its depression, it can't stand up. And the Rishonim say that you beat the animal, you prompt him, you scream and yell at him, he always immediately stands on 4 feet and nothing. Aim tguva. And you know that the animal already realizes it's about to die. So I checked out on AI, and I asked in AI, do animals suffer from depression? And AI told me they do. It's not exactly scientifically defined because we don't know what's going on in the animal's mind and psyche, but the animal definitely fails to show vitality, and we know that is going, especially amongst dogs that, they lose their what's it called, a master? I don't know what you call it. So then I wrote back to AI and I told AI, not that they care one way or the other, but I told them that according to the Talmud, an animal that even when you prompt it, it can't stand up on fours is definitely going to die. So AI writes back to me, the Talmud was brilliant and understood thousands of years in advance what science only understands today. Now, I don't know. I guess AI likes to give compliments. They want to give you a good feel. Anyway. Weiter, Rabbi Chanina bar Shalima, Mishmei de Rav Omar, Afilu ochelis bekoyos. The animal refuses to stand on all four, but yet the animal is chopping away and eating wood. Bekoyos are bekoyim are like small splinters of wood. Now, if the animal is eating splinters of wood, obviously it has some power, some vitality. And Rabbi Bar Yechezkel Omar, I'm going to go even a step further. Afilu ocheles koros. Even if the animal is still eating beams of wood, we still assume that the animal is mesukedes, and we have to clarify whether it survived until the point of shechita. Besura masni hachi, b'pumpedis masni hachi. This is just a repeat of what we just learned, namely hechidon mesukenes, Omer Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Kol shemamino saveno meres afilo chelos pekoyos Rami bar Chomamar afilo chelos koros. Ashkechei Shmuel letalmidei de Rav. Now, Shmuel, whenever he met and encountered the Talmidim of Rav, he would sort of like, out of curiosity, he would investigate, what did you learn from Rav? And then he would decide either he agreed with what Rav said or he disagreed. Amalahu, the Talmidim said the following. My Omar Rav b'mesukenes, Amrulo, and here we're going to start with Lamed Ches, get a little far for Shabbos. Hachi Omar Rav, this is what Rav said about mesukenes. Goa v'hitila rei v'kish kisha bi'azna harei zeh pirkus. Rav was mekil, and he said you could go ahead and shecht an animal as long as it exhibits the following signs of vitality. Number one, the animal goa. Goa means like coos. Number two is another possibility. Hitila rea. It expels its waste in the normal way an animal would expel. That requires a certain vitality. And number three, kiskisa ba'azna. It wiggles its ears. I didn't get a chance to look that up in AI. Do animals wiggle their ears? But I think I've seen animals wiggle ears. And Shmuel doesn't like it. Amalahu, Shmuel says to his, these Talmidim of Rav, Itzrich leili abba lazuze one. Now the word Abba here is a reference to Rav, because Abba means someone who's a scholar and is very well respected. And I don't understand why Rav had to introduce the animal wiggling its ear. In other words, Shmuel is saying that Rav went a little too far to be machmir in order to take the animal out of the state of misukenes and tell us that the animal has to demonstrate this very profound level of vitality by wiggling its ears. Ani omer, if you'd ask me, Shmuel said, kol she'eno dvarim shamisa osa. Anything that the animal wouldn't do if it was dead, that's enough to convince me. Any reflexive movement that's less profound of a sign of vitality than moving its ears. אני חוזר אליך בעוד 2 דקות, אני מסיים שיעור, בסדר? My new, what does Shmuel have in mind when he says that it doesn't have to be such a profound sign of vitality that it wiggles its ears? Hamisa osa. Amar Rav Hanan, l'didim farshale minei demar Shmuel. I'm going to explain what Shmuel had in mind. Hoise yada kfufa upashata. The animal's foreleg was bent in and it extended it. So you started the shechita and the animal still was able to extend the leg that it had bent in. Is davar shamisa osa. Pshuta v'kafufa dvarim she'ena meself. And the Gemara is going to say, "My komashmon tanina." Okay, I think we'll stop here because we're already into Daf Lamed Ches, and it's Erev Shabbos. I want to thank you again for allowing me to reschedule the shir as the shir would have gone on a normal time. I was watching the blood. Anyway, have a great Shabbos, and I guess we could see each other on Sunday. Now, wait a minute. What time? What time do we get together on Sunday?
Normally
Sunday.
noon, but if you need it earlier.